South Africa has once again abstained from a vote on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The country this week chose to abstain from a United Nations vote to suspend Russia from the UN Human Rights Council. Today, International Relations Minister Naledi Pandor said the UN must stand for rights for all and not just for Ukrainians. Let's get some perspective on this, at least from Professor Henny Strydom, Professor of International Law at the University of Johannesburg. Prof, thank you very much for always availing yourself. And so when we take a look at how countries, especially on the continent, voted, right, 10 voting in favor of this move, 1, that being Zimbabwe, outright voting no, South Africa, amongst others, abstaining. Is it as easy as a yes or no? Is international relations a little bit more complex than that?
It's far more complex than that. All kinds of economic and political and historical factors do play a role, and that is why we see this kind of division in the voting pattern. And I think on a very controversial matter like the Russian offensive against Ukraine, this is to be expected.
The International Relations Minister of South Africa saying we have resisted becoming embroiled in the politics of confrontation and aggression that has been advocated by the powerful countries. She's also called for, what applies for the goose should apply for the gander, citing the Israel-Palestine situation. Your thought, I wonder, on this position?
Yeah, those are the two issues in the statement, I think, which are important, and I think both of them invite comment. First of all, the argument about the aggression the powerful countries are accused of, in that context, South Africa fails to mention the aggression, the war of aggression that was committed by Russia and Ukraine. It's clearly, in terms of international law, a war of aggression. So I think if it wants to, apply a balanced approach to the matter, it is something to be taken into account. And the reason why I'm saying that is because of the fact that states must take it seriously, that they are the creators as well as the enforcers of international law, and they have to uphold the rule of law. So on the second point about the so-called inconsistent approach by the United Nations or any other state in this matter concerning this conflict, South Africa is guilty of exactly that. Its inconsistent behavior in the United Nations organs when voting is asked for in the case of condemnatory resolutions is well known. So it cannot accuse other states or the United Nations of applying inconsistent measures in cases of this kind, if it is itself guilty of that conduct.
The statement also points out, though, that, and I quote, our non-alignment position does not mean that we condone Russia's military intervention in Ukraine, which has violated international law. Not satisfactory?
Yes, I can understand that it wants to use the non-alignment argument in this regard, but I think that this whole argument about being non-aligned should be taken with a pinch of salt. What does it mean in the world in which we live? South Africa is clearly aligned with the states that oppose quite often measures taken or the stance taken by the West. And I do not have a problem, because that is the foreign policy choice of South Africa and other countries taking the stance. But please do not use the non-aligned argument in this regard to defend it, because they are clearly aligned in matters of this instance to one or the other side. So I think it's inappropriate to talk about the non-aligned stance and to be a member or to explain the stance taken because South Africa is a member of the non-aligned movement.
In relation, rather, to the expulsion itself, of what consequence is it for a country like Russia? They quit.
A good question. The point I want to make in this regard is the following. I don't think Russia cares much about having a position on the UN Human Rights Council, and probably cares less for human rights concerns in that regard. But I think the importance of that resolution is that Russia is getting a clear message that it is becoming more and more isolated, and that the support it perhaps counted on in the beginning, I think this also should give it a clear message that that support is dwindling. And I think from that point of view, the decision is rather important to show that there is a collective response from many states against this offensive by Russia in Ukraine.
Do you perceive, just finally for us, Prof, that the country overestimated or rather underestimated the backlash that would follow?
Yes, I'm of the view that it underestimated that, and it's probably counting, or it has counted on much more support in this regard. But I want to point out something else in this context. When the voting was about to take place, or just before that, Russia threatened those who will support the resolution or abstain with certain consequences. He didn't mention any detail in this regard. This is acting like a schoolyard bully, trying to threaten countries to influence them how to vote. And I think this is a clear indication of Russia's stance on this whole matter. And I think it adds to the suspicion that it is intent to destroy Ukraine or parts of it, and to subdue Ukraine to give in to his wishes. I think that is a total unacceptable approach to a matter of this kind.
Professor Henny Strydom, Professor of International Law at the University of Johannesburg.